Hello, it's good to have you join us on the program tonight. Omini Oden is my name. The challenge before the world today is how to revive the economy in the face of the coronavirus pandemic that adversely affected every country in the world. Nigeria is not an exception in the bleeding of the economy, as most of our major foreign exchange earnings nosedived. In the midst of these global challenges, Nigeria was among the first country to take proactive measures in the fight against COVID-19, while deploying massive financial interventions to cushion the hardship on the population through several economic packages. The federal government's efforts to create a better Nigeria to achieve national aspiration, no doubt, is in top gear. President Muhammadu Buhari has already given marching orders for the full implementation of the 2.3 trillion naira economic sustainability plan and capital projects in the 2020 budget. The new National Development Plan 2021 to 2025 is on course along with Vision 2050, while an inward look by the government to develop critical infrastructure for public goods and the fast-tracking of the economy has led to recent deregulation of the oil and gas economy in Nigeria. The power sector recovery program is ongoing to align the infrastructure deficit with Siemens Company of Germany. This is besides a host of several projects, social intervention policies of the federal government to ensure that not only speedy post-COVID economy, but Nigeria to be among the fastest growing economies in the world. Tonight on NTA Live, we shall focus on the various efforts of the government to provide functional economy to achieve national aspiration. But first is the backgrounder by Benny Adams.
Thief in the night, the virus evaded territories, stealing the livelihoods of millions across the globe. Governments locked down cities, towns and villages to avoid spread.
All citizens in these areas are to stay in their homes.
Hunger began to strike as everyone remained indoors for fear of the unknown. Then came the need to think outside the box for survival, and the task before all was to balance health and wealth. Palliatives were provided, amongst which are 3 months repayment moratorium for trader money, market money and farmer money loans, moratorium to all federal government-funded loans, and conditional cash transfer. As the virus gained ground, it rattled markets, prompting the announcement of 50 billion naira fund by the CBN governor to enable households and small businesses weather the storm as COVID-19 hits harder, and another 100 billion to support local drug manufacturing, increase bed count in hospitals, funding intensive care, as well as increasing laboratory testing, equipment and research.
Secondly, given the continuing impact of the disease on global supply chains, the Central Bank of Nigeria will increase its intervention in boosting local manufacturing and import substitution by another 1 trillion naira across all critical sectors of the Nigerian economy.
An implementation committee came alive to ensure the private sector contribution of 1.5 trillion infrastructure funding is harnessed, in addition to linking farming communities to markets, among other monetary response interventions in agriculture through the Anko Borrower program, amounting to 3.5 trillion naira. Amid rising inflation and global economic uncertainty, weak oil prices, reduced revenue, and projected low GDP growth, the federal government continuously shows commitment, one of which is the 10 billion naira palliative fund for road transport operators and workers, in addition to amendment of the Agricultural Credit Guarantee Scheme Bill, which raised share capital of the fund from 3 billion naira to 50 billion naira, recently unveiled among other interventions to stimulate the economy. Benny Adams, NTA News.
Getting the economy running amid COVID-19 is the focus of the program tonight, and Benny Adams' backgrounder sets the tone for the takeoff of the program. It's Tuesday Live, and at some point our phone lines will be open. If we are true to you, please turn down the volume of your television set and go straight to the point and address your issues. Also, you can be part of the conversation tonight through our Twitter handle at Tuesday Live NTA. My guest tonight are set to run. I have Director General, National Orientation Agency, Dr. Garba Abari. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone.
Malam Mahmoud Othman, former Commissioner for Home Affairs, Information and Rural Development and Community Development, Kano State. It's good to have you on the program.
Thank you very much. Good evening, viewers.
Professor Ken Ife, Development Economist. Good to see you on Tuesday Live tonight.
Good evening. Good
Niyi Akinseju is a financial and investment analyst. Welcome to Tuesday Live.
The player.
It's Niyi. Let's take a generic look or perspective on the economic outlook of the country as it is currently.
The truth of the matter is first established in our GDP figures for second quarter 2020. The second quarter characterize, or rather encapsulate all the consequences, as it were, of the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. And what are the undercurrent character of that particular quarter? Low transaction. Transaction is at the heart of any economy. Transaction of exchange of goods for money. Let's put it in that primary context. So where you had the social distancing policy, and of course the lockdown, it meant that the constriction of demand and constraint of supply had no meeting point. A major character was that there was supply chain disruption, and of course it also impacted the aggregate demand, because even if you had money, you could not go to the market to buy. And if you had products, you cannot also come to the market to sell. So there was that economic gap that was created. So it turned out that that reflected in our GDP figure declining to 6.1%, mainly because there was not much economic activities at that particular period. And of course, there had been some indicators of what would happen in that particular quarter, starting effectively in February to March, but it became more realized, more manifest starting in April. Well, by June, the lockdown was being lifted, and so between June and now, we are getting more into a normal, set of things, topped up by the opening up of the borders, opening up of international travels. So, to a large extent, we have moved away from a complete lockdown, to a near 90% lifting of the lockdown. So the economy is coming back to normal. But again, the consequences as a carryover of that lockdown, the social distancing policy, are still very much with us. And there will be a need in the immediate to create stimulus in the economy in a way that it will start driving, first kickstart the economy and start driving the economy. I think that, in a nutshell, captures my thoughts on the economy for now.
Thank you, Niyi. And Professor Ken Ife, going by what Niyi said, now government is about social contract with the people, and I would love to liken it to a marriage. And if this marriage between government and the people is a social contract, in the last few weeks we have seen open-ended parcels opening up, counter reactions, and what have you. Is it a build up for a brighter future, or is it a build up for a regression?
Well, I think, first of all, people are reacting to the figures that have been rolled out. I mean, instinctively, they know what is coming, because there's a strong correlation between the sectors that were completely shut down and the results that you saw, the depth of the decline in their growth rates. Construction came to a halt, and then you could see 30%, 42% growth in construction a year before now, and now minus 30. So there's a huge swing of 70% drop. Food, you saw that. That minus catering, they went down by 30%. Then aviation, as part of transport went by 30%, but about 49%. But aviation itself within transport was 57%. And you know that transport connects to travel and tourism and hotel and all of that. All of them went down with aviation, without a doubt. But having said that, there were sectors that showed some signs of growth. The ICT, because the main conduit for communication now is just ICT. So we're all seeing the ICT shoot. And I hope we will underpin that, because it's gone up by 15% in growth, in terms of growth. And this contribution to GDP also jumped from 10% to 14%. And for the first time is ahead of trade, which is just under 14%, 13.something%. And then it's gone ahead of oil and gas. And so what then happens is that by the end of this year, all things being equal, they could hit 20%, and for the first time challenge agriculture, which is the highest. So we're going to have to see. But then there's also a good sign on the financial services. And bear in mind, which grew about 18%, bear in mind that the focal point of the action from the central bank was to prevent this health crisis transporting to a financial crisis. So most of the intervention that they did was to restore liquidity in the capital market, not in the capital market, sorry, the financial, in the commercial banks. And they can see how that, but of course they also benefited from technology. So you can see how people were staying at home, but they were using their internet and things to do their banking. So they benefited from the growth, and I just hope that all that can be underpinned and supported.
Okay. Dr. Barry, you have been on the driving seat in all this. You head a sector where you interface with the people, and despite all the developments, social welfare is key. Government has to be responsive to the people. From your perspective, how is government responding regarding social welfare of the people amid all these developments?
Well, thank you very much. I think let me come from the perspective of head of Citizens Engagement Agency and say, from what has already been said by both me and Professor IFE, the lessons that we should draw, and which I hope we are actually driving from COVID-19 and its concomitant effect on the economy, and of course on our social lives, and of course on lives and livelihoods. Government is responding, and responding very well. What we have seen in the recent past, and the lesson is that the private sector that has always been seen to be the driver of the economy, the fulcrum upon which all progress in the economic and social front lies, has also been exposed and beaten onto line, making it clear that the state now, and not private capital, the state actually is the provider, because even the private sector is now running back to the state to ask for bailout. Citizens are asking for bailout justifiably because the essence of governance or the essence of government, provision of social services, protection of life and property, and what have you. So we are in a situation where we have to communicate to citizens that given the challenges that have been thrown up by the global pandemic and the concomitant effect of all of this on our economy and on our lives as individuals first, because when I had to sit down under lockdown for 6 weeks, and the knee had actually sufficiently captured that. Where I have the money, I cannot go to the market to buy. Where I have something to sell, I cannot go to the market to sell. So you can see how from both sides we are burning. The pandemic was burning the candles from both sides. The pandemic was burning the candles from both sides. Now, government is responding, and they're responding favorably in so many ways. Through the lockdown, to the time when the lockdown started to get eased, and the government was also responding in commensurate quantum to the need of that moment. Now, with the economy almost coming back to normal, we are not anywhere near what we should be. But with the opening of the economy now almost coming full cycle, we can say that the sustainability package that have just been released by the federal government, you can see definitely that government is responding in such a way that jobs will have to be created, small holder enterprises will be supported, construction work will resume in housing, on roads, on, and with all the commensurate multiplier effect of that on the economy and on smallholder economic entrepreneurs and what have you. So by and large, we have a big challenge as a government, like all governments over the world are now having, because we had a new, what we call a new experience. Of course, no little wonder that the COVID-19 was called novel COVID-19. Yeah. It's new. It came out with its own challenges. Nobody anticipated it. When it came with different levels of mutations here and there. We are still grappling with how to find the medicine for it. And you can see everybody is now talking about near normal. We have to live with it. We cannot continue to lock down. We have to continue wearing our masks and keeping social distancing. But at the same time also responding to the challenges that it has thrown upon us as people, upon us as nations, and upon us as a global community. Because for the first time, this is a time there had never been in the last 100 years when the world came to a complete standstill for such as the one we have seen in the period during the lockdown. Okay. But I think the government is responding, and they're responding favorably. Okay. But there are still challenges, and we are not near what we should. We are not where we should be. Okay. But we are definitely giving hope. We are giving hope. The leadership is giving hope. The leadership is so oblivious of the challenges of the moment, and it is responding responsibly in line with the dictates of his mandate.
Okay. Ola Mahmood, let me get your perspectives.
Well, I want to align myself with a lot of things Dr. Abari said. First of all, the world is learning something new. Since creation, maybe since Adam and Eve, there was never a time in the history of humanity when one particular disease came and touched every country of the world. All the 202 governments we have in the world, national governments, that means countries representing the United Nations, there was not a single one that escaped COVID-19. And therefore, the scare and the trauma thrown by this new experience took everybody off balance. Business came to a standstill. Even governments came to a standstill. No schools, nothing you can think of that we used to take for granted. Now, when we started getting used to it after 6 months, all sorts of initiative came out to humanity as usual. Governments in different parts of the world came with one thing or the other called palliative. One of the countries in the Southern Africa, I don't want to mention the name, their palliative was, I saw people queued and everybody was given cabbage. If you know, a bowl of cabbage. And the people were happy. They queue for cabbage. So if you go to the other extreme, you go to West Germany, where paid almost every citizen everything they need during the close down. And then the businesses were also helped, so they will not run down. So manufacturing came to a standstill. If you cannot manufacture, that means you don't need workers. All those services, from tourism to anything, those countries that rely on tourism are the number one contributor or serious contributor to the GDP. Of course, so red more than some of us who have only one mono product. In our own case, oil. So you depend on one product, you are in big trouble. Whether it is tourism or oil or any other product. Therefore, the experience we gained in the last 6 months, which we are now reluctantly coming out of it, we are still learning. Everybody is still trying whether it will work. But some of the fundamentals that we take for granted in our usual way of doing things, now at least we are being put to test. All those things, you cannot keep doing the same thing and getting the same result. If you want to improve, you have to do something different. And I think that's where we are now.
Okay, thank you. Let's go back to Kenife and Akinsijuni and Kenife. Let me begin with Professor Kenife. In all these, various decisions have been taken, and I would love to knock it from this line. The timing may be inauspicious, but there is no bad time to do what is right. Let's look at recent decisions taken by government. A number of Nigerians see it on the surface. They refuse to look at it in-depthly. Beginning with, let's say, the oil and gas, petroleum price in the country. A number of persons are not looking at it from the long term. They are seeing it from the short term. That's why I said the timing may be inauspicious, but there is no bad time to do what is right. How do you open up from here?
Well, first of all, the decision to deregulate is a correct one. But then it's a partial deregulation. So you have the PPR agency constantly dimming the floor price, and then giving the leeway for the oil marketers to play with the price, at least giving the floor. But that's the right move. But obviously, there's nothing you will do that people will not complain about. Obviously, about the timing, but we have to take those decisions. The same with the electricity. My worry about the electricity is that we need to meter. People are going to be worried that you are raising their price when you have still not addressed the fundamentals of metering them so that they are paying the correct price. But when people can pay the correct price, then we have to face the reality that this industry needs to, we have to work with the correct economic price for people to come into the investors to come into the industry. So I can see that side where for those who are metered is okay. But for those who are not metered, they will feel very bitter. that we are still, subjectively giving them a price that you cannot defend.
Still on you, from what you're saying, is it a right decision or is it a bad decision for the economy?
The correct decision, but you may have issues about the timing. But there are very important decisions that have to be made. I have different view about how much we can put our faith on fossil-based fossil energy-based economic development. I'm not with you on that, because we have seen so many plans, 2010, 2020, so many plans, and they all talk about structural change, diversification, but none of these plans have addressed the structural change. The structural change that needs to be addressed is moving away. Every country is moving away from fossil energy-based economic planning and development. We are not moving away. Our transportation system is still dependent on fossil fuel. We are not imbibing the bioenergy. We are not imbibing the non-fossil fuel. Our industries are still based on that power that is coming from more fossil fuel dependent. Our power generation system is still fossil fuel dependent. And so we're not moving. Germany is generating $466 billion on bioenergy. Just Germany. And we have all the agroecology in Nigeria to produce. And we're not doing that. We haven't moved. NNPC keeps telling us stories about when they're going to they need 10 million liters, and Dangote needs 20 million liters, but they're not making enough effort. And we're the biggest producer of cassava in the world, by far the biggest producer of cassava, 60 million metric tons. And all we need is 1.27 billion liters of ethanol to make sure that 10% ethanol mix in petrol is implemented in the country. Very small proportion, not even up to 500,000 liters, tons of about just under 300,000 tons of cassava. But we're not doing it. We're not doing it. So it is one thing to say, let us increase the export of sesame seed and all that without the quality infrastructure. You can't export those. You can export them and you have difficulties. But even where they projected in the zero oil plan that if you assume Nigeria is going to be supplying 5% of certain 11 commodities, will supply 5% of the world supply, it all came to $29 billion. That can be one product from bioeconomy. And we need to talk about this. I want to bring bioeconomy, digital economy to the center stage of our development planning, and then make sure that we are kissing goodbye to fossil fuel-based economic planning. We've got to move. The whole world has moved, and we haven't. We're only seeing these fringes that you can get some export revenue to do this. Digital technology would affect and define all factors of production and all means of exchange, yes. And that's why it is sitting where it is. But bioeconomy can employ everybody in this country. Oil and gas mining can't employ 1 million people. But that will cost, and everything you require for this bioeconomy cannot be imported. But everything you produce from it can be exported. So that is the real challenger to forex revenue. And we need to move this to the center stage.
Kenife, I know where I'm actually driving at. In reacting to or follow up to what Professor Kenife just said, let me activate you from here. In public governance, in leadership, there's a dilemma or there's a connection between courage and fear. Courage and fear in taking decisions. You need courage to take certain very good decisions, even if in the surface of it, people may not like it, but in the long term, they applaud you. So in all this, how do you react to it, given recent reactions regarding government decisions in the country?
It's principally about the quality of leadership. Leadership essentially is about aggregating the interests of the led, of the people, and of course acting in an appropriate manner to advance that same interest. Sometimes there may not be a consensus, on the right kind of decision to make to advance the interests of the led, that is of the people. But it's the leader that stands, in the gap that determines to what extent he or she wants to carry on or advance the interests of the people for the good of the people. And that is where, for me, it is not even about courage. It's more about love, because when a leader has a capacity to project appropriately, a leader is not a short-termer. It's not even a medium-termer. A leader looks beyond so many years. So in taking a decision, the leader will be looking at what will impact the people over a period of 20, 30, 40 years. So in taking a decision, how would this decision, in the short term, most quality decisions in the short term have apparent injurious impact, always in the short term. But in the long term, they come with consequences that positively impact the people. But of course, any community of people, the larger percentage of the people in that community are constituted by people who are, say, at the low, the base of the pyramid, and these people are economically defined as not too active, and they are principally 3 square meals population. What's important to them is to feed 3 times a day, morning, afternoon, and evening. Now, where those, and that actually for me, I'm using that as a basic definition, of vulnerability. So where they think that these basic things are being threatened in terms of what they eat, in terms of their little access to power, in terms of their access to water, and just basic things of life, there's a natural tendency, of course, to trigger anger. But what I've realized in Nigeria is that the elite group, the elite class that enjoy so much privilege at very cheap rate, find a way of rousing the temperament or the anger of the people, and it's as if they were acting, or they are acting on behalf of the people. And I think that is wrong. The important thing for me is that at every point in time, we must know what are those things that are actually creating vulnerability in the government, in the environment, in our environment. And I have zeroed in to the fact that our major weakness in the economy is productivity. So it is not, the whole thing boils down to how do we produce in a way that it will be cheaper, in a way that it will be competitive. Whatever we are producing, it will be competitive both in the domestic and in the global market, and in a way that it will also be convenient, to produce. If we don't have constant power, we cannot produce competitively. If we don't have fuel as appropriately supplied, we cannot produce competitively. And if we are also subsidizing these products as they were, it also translates to the fact that we will be constrained, because it means that what government is supposed to be spending money on will be misaligned. As far as I'm concerned, subsidizing fuel is like just subsidizing consumption. It's like taking a liter, when you buy 10 liters of fuel, of PMS, and it's subsidized to the tune of about 200 or 300 naira. By the time you use that 10 liters, it translates to mean that you have actually consumed without producing, in consequential order, that quantity of fuel. So, meanwhile, same Nigerians are actually protesting. Some Nigerians are actually protesting that we are taking so much debt. Now, if you cannot organically generate revenue, you will have to take debt. Now, but if you have a subsidy somewhere, which means you have money that you are actually spending on the consumption, on the consuming item, and you have the alternative of saying, look, why don't we stop this subsidy so that we can use it for the infrastructure that we need, that will enhance our productivity, and to that extent, be able to save money and direct into that infrastructure. That means we would also be reducing our need for taking loan. So it has overlapping impact on themselves, as it were. So for me, I must confess that perhaps this will be the first time I am understanding these dynamics. I've always been on the side, perhaps because of my tendency. I tend towards managed economy, But I believe at this time we have gone too far, One, our susceptibility to the dynamics in the environment, especially our incapacitation in terms of infrastructural deficiencies and all that, are too obvious. And it is obvious that we may not have the capacity to organically, generate the revenue to fill this gap. If we do not fill this gap, we will just be slumbering, and it is as if we will stagnate. There is a need to trigger this economy. And if we are triggering this economy, it must be about sacrifices. Because, yes, we talk about huge potentials. But the Prof just talked about biofuel and all that. They are there everywhere. I mean, we have cassava, you have vegetables, so many things we can do, But if there are no resources in terms of revenue to drive this, you are incapacitated. So I think this policy is appropriate to the extent that, well, for those I am not one of, for those that are protesting that we are taking so much loan, this is one way, of course, to direct, money that we are spending on consumption into what we need, and therefore reduce our need for loan. That is one. Then two, I think the central bank too is making a lot of effort to diversify our power needs. Our power, the power alternatives. Of recent, I've heard of a $2 billion solar energy funding for enterprises in that sector. So much that the limit, the single obligor limit for whoever is interested in that is 500 million, and I think it is good, Then, of course, the NNPC too, in fact, led by the Minister of Power, is also leading the charge in the area of compressed natural gas. We have been flaring gas for a long time, and it's cheaper and it's cleaner, If we are able, I understand, and it's practical. We've been talking about this. The first time I heard about this project was, I think, about 25 or 27 years ago. But it has we've just been talking. But I think now there's some kind of reality coming to it with the recent announcement that 27,000 filling stations will be equipped, to fill compressed natural gas. Most of these are in the NNPC branded outlets. Now, what that says is that we are also providing a competitive alternative to PMS. So it's not that we are not just going to be fixated on petrol always. We are talking of petrol now. We are also talking of compressed natural gas. Yes, it may take some technology and some cost, initially. But going forward, it will NLC or TUC or anybody will not have any need to carry placard anytime there's an increase in the price of petroleum. So I think that if we are able to successfully diversify, the energy sector, it will help so much.
I'll still come back to you. We are settling in somewhere, and I know I'm happy we are heading somewhere with it. Did you know the two guests over there have talked about vulnerability, the need to trigger the economy, the need for Nigerians to sacrifice. I know you heard an agency that is involved face-to-face on a daily basis, citizens engagement. We'll go to there, but still heading where we are heading. Let me ask you the next question with this reaction from somewhere. Not everything unpopular with the people is bad. How do you react to this? Judging from what Nii just concluded and Professor Kenife, not everything unpopular with the people is bad.
Well, that is, I think this is perhaps a summary of the reaction to what we are seeing in respect of certain decisions that government has taken recently, especially in two critical areas: power and energy. From the perspective of a citizen's engagement agency, we can say that not every decision that is taken is a bad decision, yes. But we cannot assume that all citizens are aware of this dictum. We cannot assume that citizens or all citizens are aware of this dictum. It is therefore against that backdrop that we feel that it should be adequate sensitization for the people to understand the philosophy, the motive behind what steps government had taken so far. I think in black and white, from what both Professor Kenife and NTA are now saying, this government and indeed the country, it doesn't have to be this government now, indeed the country can no longer afford the luxury of subsidy. This is one. What does it mean? Well, the country doesn't have the resources now. If it had been able to do it in the past, now it cannot afford to do that. But at the same time, the government is also conscious of the need to trigger the economy so that lives and livelihoods will be so positively affected by these policies. That's one. Two, infrastructure needs to be developed. The government is trying as much as possible to free as much of its resources as it can to develop infrastructure. What does COVID-19 teach us? The world over, what COVID-19 has shown, and even deriving from the experiences of the advanced countries, is that governments have not been investing as adequately as they should in the area of social services, especially health. Especially health. And we have seen this even with the advanced countries that are up to now yet to come out fully. You know, with all their advanced infrastructure, with all the advanced health care services that many developing countries run to seek for help, we have seen actually the inadequacies that they have actually suffered, you know, because of COVID-19. So in this respect, while we while Nigeria needs infrastructure, while Nigeria needs enhanced social services, rebuilding of education and school, investing in IT, the digital economy, which happily is actually witnessing exponential growth, while we need to also plan for our youth and for the aged population, whatever resources government can get to free for purposes of provision of this, it has to do, and it is doing. Now, it is not even enough. So, if it is not enough, what do you need to do? You freeze the trapped resources, and of course you go and borrow it. Because this is the only way you can kickstart the economy and make economic activities pick up, so fast as to counter the effect of the lockdown. Now, where do we as a citizens engagement agency come in? Sensitization. Okay. Sensitization. Make citizens aware that not all decisions that are taken are eventually bad decisions. They could be very painful decisions, yes. But you see, the point is we are not hoping that we'll go back to these dark days of old. A country of over 200 million people with a population growth of nearly over 3 million, 3% per annum, with a youth bulge of over 70% below the age of 35. That is actually a country that that has a lot of resources if nurtured, if harnessed, if capacitated, for growth and development. And this is what precisely government is trying to do. Let me tell you a story. I have heard so much about the hue and the cry about escalating food crisis. Escalating the hunger in the land. People can no longer afford to eat. We are facing a food crisis. This is not. I don't think this country is experiencing a food crisis. Of course, we are experiencing a situation where food prices are so high, and the government is so unaware, and that is why measures are being taken. The presidential address after the retreat and before the retreat, and the responsiveness that government has actually put in place to tackle the issue of food high food prices, okay, are actually indicative of the fact that government is not unaware of this problem and is therefore addressing the issue the way it should be. Back in 1984, that was the time when the country actually faced. When I was a middle level civil servant at that time. When I had to queue for sugar, and if I wanted two packs of sugar, I could only be given one, or at least the whole a family of two will be giving only one pack to share. I had to queue for rice. I had to queue for milk in this country. But we have already passed that stage. Yeah. And the government is now saying, citizens, we are giving you hope, and they keep the hope alive, and that we are not unaware of the realities on ground, and that whatever it needs to be done is actually being done, and we are not really oblivious of the hardship. But hardship are transient, and of course it is all part of our nation development challenges, okay, which we will overcome.
Okay. In a couple of minutes, we'll be taking some reports, and shortly after that, we'll take a break, and when we come back, we'll take a couple of tweets that have come in. But before then, let me ask Malam Uthman. Malam Uthman, there's always a saying that there's no better time than now. The time is now. From the ambit of sacrifice, when will you say is the best time to sacrifice? Is it just wait till tomorrow or right now?
Well, to answer that question, we have to go back to see where we come from. We allow some bankrupt ruling elites to do whatever they wanted in our country. We are not serious, but there must be a dead end. We must be serious. We don't have a choice. We have reached the cul-de-sac. There is no way. Either you come back or you keep going, whether you knock your head or whatever. We discovered petroleum back in 1958. When it became commercial and were exporting it, we too became crude, like the crude oil were exporting. We didn't bother to have a refinery. By the time we had 4 refineries, corruption moved in, killed the 4 refineries, allowed some people to vandalize the 5 lines that took refined petroleum to depots. Now we invited about 300,000 trucks to go to Lagos because there is a port there. We allow some people to put out what they call farm tanks. What happened? They say they are importing fuel. Since we don't have refineries to refine, therefore we have to import. But from what I watch, National Assembly public hearing, when they were investigating all this subsidy story, some of the so-called subsidy prophets did not even register their company with Corporate Affairs Commission. But they are collecting billions every month. Subsidy. It is a big cartel. That cartel, I don't know who was the godfather. But from what I watch in the National Assembly hearing, giant oil tankers come from somewhere. Maybe Venezuela, maybe North Sea oil, maybe whatever, maybe Algeria, God knows where. They come to Cotonou and stop there. Small boats go to Cotonou, pick whatever it is, 62 nautical miles from Tinkan to Cotonou in the sea, bring so-called imported fuel to farm tanks in Apapa, Creek Road there. Then all these tankers from Calabar, from Maiduguri, from Damaturu, from Ilela, from Ilorim, from Ilaro, they all moved to Lagos to carry. Nobody built that road because when you come from Benin or you come from Ibadan, you end up in Shagamu. That's the only way you can go to Lagos. So that road, that Shagamu-Lagos, or that Lagos, Shagamu, Apapa, whether it is Julius Berger or Julius Caesar you bring to construct that road, it will not last. And then what happened? These anointed people who are collecting money called subsidy, who have nothing to show for it. Some of them did not bring a single thing. Nobody, all the petroleum we are consuming, no Nigerian importer was importing it from Saudi Arabia or Venezuela or all those oil countries outside Nigeria. But so you cannot live on that falsehood forever. Something must happen. I know we have been struggling against petroleum subsidy removal. When they came with SAP in the mid-80s, it was a big struggle. Workers were against it, ordinary people. This story we keep hearing all over again. But now we have reached a dead end. What do? They are trying to bring back refineries. If public refineries cannot work, Dangote is doing his own. Maybe other people will come to do their own. If you don't refine your petroleum in your own country, you are as crude as the crude oil you are exporting. Because it is when you refine, you get all those petroleum byproducts. Every paint, every plastic, fertilizer, whatever you call it. All synthetic fiber, everything you can think of. Now, because you now took your crude oil to refine people who refined it, and you crude one go and collect it, give them the same money they give you for crude per barrel. to give you what you call raw materials to come and produce. Then your money, proceeds for your crude, cannot pay for your consumption. Therefore, what do? You go out borrowing. When you go out borrowing, what is it? IMF, the World Bank will wake up. You are not credit worthy until our sister, you come to World Bank, our sister IMF must certify that you are credit worthy. They come with conditionalities. Those conditionalities are anti-people. You come and try their so-called conditionalities, people rise up to go to war with the government. What do? You have to bring peace. This peace you are bringing, what do? Whether it is handcuffs, whether it is tear gas, is still imported. So imperialist economic system has tied our Afron string. We don't even know how to free ourselves and go away. So we have now reached a dead end. Whether we like it or not, it cannot be business as usual.
Okay.
The biggest culprit of all this is corruption. You hear lazy people say, Nigerian border is porous. Nigerian border is not porous. It is just some heads of some public people that is porous. Take the border from where River Niger comes into Nigeria. You go to Kamba, you go to Gaya, a small place called Gaya, which is in Niger. Follow that line across the Nigerian border all the way to Lake Chad, where you hit Lake Chad. It's more than 1,500 kilometers. But you cannot cross Niger and spend 30 minutes without the gendarme picking you somewhere. Pick any bush you like. But when you come to Nigeria, our public officials who compromise say our borders are for us, therefore everything is possible here. Whether it is smuggling, whether it is human trafficking, whatever you call it. So somebody must take a stand. Those who are benefiting from these crimes, of course, will not fold their arms until you can deal with them ruthlessly. The legal system is working in cahoot. It's not the fault of the judges, but the system we inherited from our colonial masters, which we amplify now to become like a religion. You cannot go anywhere with that kind of system. So, when Nigerian people, if there is information management properly, they will understand.
Okay.
Otherwise, the disgruntled elites who are not getting what they want will keep fanning the embers of hatred, ethnic chauvinism, religious bigotry, and that's what they are doing. That's the only thing they can do. It's the lazy man's way to get away with murder.
Malam Usman, quite touchy and breathtaking your analysis. We'll come back to you, but once again, first join us, we are taking a look at getting the economy running amid COVID-19. At the beginning, we told you we'll have a couple of reports dotting the landscape of the country in sustaining the conversation. A couple of tweets have come in, and our phone lines will be displayed on the screen. When we'll come back from break, we'll take the tweets, and for a reminder, our Twitter handle is @TuesdayLive NTA. You can be part of the conversation. Our first report tonight is emanating from Abuja, put together by Jide.
Meeting at a time that the world is struggling to overcome the economic and social crisis caused by the novel COVID-19 pandemic. Deliberations at this first ministerial performance review retreat included consequences of the pandemic, especially as the ministers would have to adjust policy approaches and method of working going forward.
The priorities we set for ourselves were around 9 interrelated and interconnected areas, which are stabilizing the economy, achieving agriculture and food security, attaining energy sufficiency in power and petroleum products, improving transportation and other infrastructure,
as well as building a system to fight corruption, improve governance, and strengthen national security. President Muhammadu Buhari explains some of the achievement in the face of the current economic crunch brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic.
I am glad that these policies, programs, and projects have recorded appreciable successes. Our renewed vigor on agriculture has been demonstrated through our Anchor Growers program and the Presidential Fertilizer Initiative. We have made progress on the railway projects with a view to connecting different parts of the country. Work is ongoing at the second Niger Bridge and is at 46% completion.
Nigerians expect dedication and commitment by the ministers in implementing programs and projects to improve quality of lives and set Nigeria on the path of prosperity.
More than ever before, I charge us all to play as a team, because that is what we are.
The president underscores this expectation at the retreat and reiterated the resolve of the administration to lifting 100 million Nigerians out of poverty in the next 10 years.
Our next report, Steve from Abuja, is put together by Lydia.
President Muhammadu Buhari says benefits of petrol deregulation is similar to experience in telecommunications. Though the deregulation of petrol is causing some hardship across the country for now, the initial pain will eventually give way to greater benefits among Nigerians. Some of these benefits, the federal government say, include a significant reduction in the price and availability of the product at all times. The president was speaking on this issue at the first-year ministerial performance review retreat for ministers, permanent secretaries and top government functionaries in Abuja.
The thrust reposed in us by Nigerians remains the ultimate driving force. We cannot afford to lose focus regardless of the challenges. I have directed the Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planner, the Governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, and all other responsible agencies to ensure speedy and timely release of funds to MDAs.
His sentiments are shared by key players in the country's development theme, oil and gas stakeholders, who insist it is only the way to make Nigerian oil and gas sector viable.
You all know Mr. President's alignment with the position of the poor people in Nigeria. He has always been on the side of the poor people. And left to Mr. President, I am very certain that he will never have increased pump price. But for this to happen, we must understand that this must be an inevitable policy direction, especially at this time of COVID-19.
We have succeeded in delivering the regulation of petroleum product with all the caveats that exist on refinery revamp. But I would like to say that there are significant activities that are going on.
It's difficult to eat our cake and have it. The economy is going through a very serious contraction. The government has decided in its wisdom to hands off pricing of petroleum products. The industry is going through a deregulation at the moment, which means that pricing of petroleum products will be market-driven.
Though they have acknowledged the difficult development is causing Nigerians, they reiterated that government will continue to seek ways and means of cushioning the pains of Nigerians, particularly the most vulnerable. Various speakers believe the Buhari administration should be commended for the political will to redeem Nigeria economically, assuring that Nigerians will be better off in the long run.
Our next stop in sustaining the conversation is the report from Lagos.
Impact of COVID-19 on Nigeria's economy resulted in some level of uncertainties that affected the micro and macroeconomic sectors. As a responsive government committed to the actualization of its fiscal and monetary policy, an adoption of a revised 2020 budget was performed in a period oil price at the global markets nosedived. In stimulating a performing economy, the federal government, in the revised 2020 budget, widened the conditional cash transfer program nets by 150 billion naira to support states and local governments, while other key sectors received some relief funds to resuscitate their businesses.
The effort of the government during that pandemic is also commendable. Frankly, in spite of the volatile nature of our economy, yet the government could take risk of mopping fund and saying, okay, 50 billion to pump into the economy to see how the resilient class of the economy, which I called small e economists. These are players in the global economy in this country. And then, yes, that bold effort of the government to, bring in substantial financial succor to the small and medium enterprises is quite commendable.
While the federal government cut down on its spending in order to return the economy on the path of growth, the CBN was also proactive in its monetary policy in May, as 100 basis points was cut from the rate, while the Apex Bank made liquidity available for non-bank financial institutions, leading to significant lowering of market yields of government securities.
Remember that the government also, during these pandemic issues, had the regulatory forbearance to, particularly to banks, that resulted from the CBN's instructions or moral suasion to restructure credit facilities in most financial institutions as much as close to about 41% of their loan portfolio. This is also to mitigate the impact of loan loss provisions, the impact of bad loans that this has created.
With the ease in lockdown and reopening of the economy for business activities, as well as the federal government's economic policies on ease of doing business and sustaining a vibrant economy, economic experts have expressed optimism on a more performing economy post-COVID-19.
Getting the economy running amid COVID-19 is the focus of Tuesday Live tonight. When we return after the break, we'll take some tweets and some phone calls. Stay with us.
People get their news and information from more media sources than ever before. Some of the news and information given are fake, unverified, doctored, and manufactured to create confusion, stir disaffection, and cause disunity. Before you believe or share any news, ask yourself, is this real? Is it from a credible source? Is it verified or verifiable? Fake news is dangerous, whether you do it for fun or for political gains. Real people can get hurt. Fake news, don't create it, don't spread it.
This is a public service announcement from NTA.
You can follow us on all our social media platforms: Facebook at NTA Network News, Instagram at NTA Network, Twitter at NTA News Now, YouTube at NTA News Online. Or visit www.nta.ng. For live streaming, visit www.nta.ng/live. Now, you can stay updated on the go, be it on your TV, iPhone, laptop, or iPad, or download the NTA mobile application from your Play Store or App Store. NTA, you can beat the rich.
Tuesday Live, a network issue-oriented innovation talk show.
And tonight we take a look at getting the economy running amid COVID-19. A couple of tweets came in while we're on break, and I'll begin with the very last one that came because it needs to be addressed. The tweet is coming from Clement Uzaigbe. It says, how do we have access to various government interventions? Let me allow Dr. Barry to react to that.
Oh, okay, thank you very much. There are so many government interventions. You know, there are interventions that are domiciled in the central bank. There are interventions by the Small and the Medium Enterprises Development Agency, which are being carried out in liaison with state governments. There are interventions by the National Social Insurance Program, which are domiciled in the Ministry of humanitarian development, and then there are also interventions that you find at other different government agencies, whichever of the interventions that one requires. First, they are being advertised in the nation's newspapers. Secondly, they are also being advertised in the in various social media platforms, and they give addresses or websites that citizens are expected to actually access the particular or given websites. And so it all depends on actually even the NSIP. It depends on which of the categories of the interventions we are talking about. Is it N-Power? Is it the technology development support? Is it the teacher program? Is it so there are different categories actually of the NSIP. You know, there are small and medium enterprises intervention scheme that the Simidan is actually warehousing, and it is doing this with actually state focal persons. You know, citizens can access this when they reach the relevant focal persons in their respective states. You know, there are also agricultural intervention domicile in the central bank, maybe the Ankoboros program. There are also equally, just like the Simidan one, the small and the medium enterprises support scheme, which is also domiciled in the central bank. And all of this, there are particular websites that are being given for citizens to actually access. The newspapers carry this kind of information. I have had also quite a number of radio programs where such interventions are being advertised, you know, in the FM stations. So I think this answers the question.
Okay. The next tweet coming from Darkstar Asen. Let me take that to Malam Othman. It says, getting the economy running includes trying to clip the wings of the cabal. Maybe that even amplifies what you said before we went on break. How do you react to this?
Well, it needs political will. And that political will has started to show itself. Because if you are going to deal with corruption, you have to be ready. Because, first of all, corruption is a byproduct of indiscipline. How did we reach this level where we are? Because of I don't care attitude of a lot of our public functionaries that served us in the past. And it is very easy to deceive people. When we were paying cheap petroleum, just like yesterday, people have forgotten where we go and queue 1.5 kilometers waiting for our turn. People sleep in the petrol stations. By the time it will come to your level, they say the fuel has finished. A liter, 600 naira, 700 naira.
Let's take our first caller and come back to you.
Okay.
Our first caller tonight on the program is calling from Ibadan. Kunle. Hello, Kunle. Hello, Kunle. You're on to Tuesday Live tonight. Hello, Kunle. Hello, Kunle. Can you hear us? Okay. Please conclude, please. It's like we have.
So if we want to make progress, there must be continuity about public policy. If we have decided enough is enough with the so-called petroleum subsidy, so be it. But at least in return, we are guaranteed permanent and stable supply of petroleum energy. No, private sector will not complain on this. But a situation where we find it very difficult as a people to take decisions when they are needed. And then we have to apologize later. It's not leadership. So the mafia, or what do you call it, cartel, or whatever they call it, they are human beings like you and me. They are Nigerians. And only in Nigeria you find some things happening. For example, vandalization of petroleum product, either pipeline or whatever. We are not the only country in the world with petroleum. Nobody has ever had anybody vandalizing anything in Gabon, or Algeria, or Angola. Not talk of Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE, and so on and so on. Only in Nigeria this happened. So those foot soldiers who are doing all this, they have a godfather who is directing them to do it. Where do small people who vandalize petroleum, where do they get the boat that carries it? When they carry it, where do they take it to? When outsiders come to our shores, they are helped by our own people to come to the riverine areas and siphon crude oil from pipeline.
Okay, let's take this caller. I hear that Kunle is back from Ghana. Hello, Kunle. Hello, Kunle. If you can hear me, go ahead, please. Well, sir, please could conclude, please, so that we can move on, please.
So the way out is government agencies that are responsible for doing a lot of things. They have to wake up. We don't have to beg them to do their duty. No fear, no favor. Whoever does it, deal with him. The laws are there in the books.
Okay.
But if we want to compromise, then of course we'll get nowhere.
Okay. Thank you so much. Let's go to a tweet coming from Umrah, at Umrah. Let me direct it at you and see how you react to it. Getting the economy running amid COVID-19 requires sincere and incorruptible stakeholders who will ensure strict checks and balance in all government policies and support as regards to developing the various sectors of the economy, especially agriculture and power supply. How do you react to this?
The owner of that tweet puts the issue in proper perspective and context, because whatever may be the policies of government, the discipline of honesty and incorruptibility, it's very important, because no matter how brilliant a policy or a program may be, if it's not properly implemented, or if there's undercurrent of dishonesty, it won't have the desired impact. In the Nigerian situation, and of course as programs are unfolding, what is sure, what is definite is that the programs so far are impressive programs. Either you are looking at it from the National Social Investment Programs, or you are looking at it from the stimulus plan, the economic stimulus plan, or you are looking at the CBN and the Bankers Committee interventions, and so many others. My own thinking really is that the government, in collaboration with the CBN, and I will continue, to commend the CBN for its development financing interventions. The collaboration between the Monetary Authority and the Fiscal Authority is creating a new ecosystem, in the economic space. It's not just about this 2.3 trillion naira that we are talking about. That's just happening now. But before then, there have been a number of policies that started creating cushion, in the environment, as if in preparation for the negative consequences of the pandemic. So, of recent now, we are talking of payroll support fund. There's also the survival fund, 75 billion survival fund. There's also the SMEs offtake program too. These are very brilliant interventionist programs because it talks directly to the SMEs that will be vastly affected, on the heels of this pandemic. And why am I saying so? 60 to 65% of transactions, in the economy are facilitated by people in this class of the economy, and the pandemic had affected them so much because they usually don't have a fallback. One, in terms of savings, they are mostly a 24-hour transactional entities. They supply goods or services, they earn money that same day, and that same day they have economic needs, to buy things, and which means that at the end of the day, they may not even have a single saving out of that. So, and you now have a pandemic that stopped them from transacting any form of business for a period of 6 weeks, more or less. Now, that would have created a lot of gap. This same SMEs, the small and medium enterprises, especially the small enterprises that employ 2-3 people, earning 30,000, paying 30,000, 20,000, 50,000 here and there. Now, it is because there was no transaction available for them, during this period, that gap would also impact their employees more or less. So, if they cannot make a earning at that time, how would they also now pay the 2-3 people they had employed? So I think this payroll support fund that is being introduced is also a very brilliant idea. And there's also the survival fund for transporters, artisans, and others, those who make do, who go by on 20,000-30,000 naira a month. Now that's the grants. It's also that's money being put directly in the pockets of Nigerians, and by doing that, you trigger economic transactions, and that's how the thing keeps circling and values are created. Now, if you have this kind of programs and you have superintendents that are not sincere about implementing them, of course, we'll have challenges. So it is important not just to have programs, we must have people like Dr. Abari, orientating officers, that will be placed, in the area of implementing this thing, so as not to see it as their own private, interest advancement, but for patriotic advancement. Because now a number of people are distressed, and these interventions are the kind of interventions that can quickly create, enablement to move them out of that distress situation.
Professor Kenife, you have to react to the tweets coming in from at Haruna Brimo. It says, with 60% revenue loss, the first thing now is to drive fiscal prudence and prioritize resources allocation to critical sectors that can fast-track economic diversification for job creation, social scheme designs for empowerment, and continuous infrastructural development. How do you react to this?
Well, that's true, but the devil is in the detail. Infrastructure, we all agree, government needs to continue to invest in infrastructure. But where we are at odds is the precise scope of government's intervention in infrastructure. We have seen intense borrowing activity around infrastructure. But we've also agreed in March this year that the private sector is taking the bull by the horn with a 15 trillion capitalization of an infrastructure company, which will be backed by a bridge of $2 billion by way of sovereign guarantee from federal government. And then all those infrastructure projects government is carrying should be transferred to this body to sort it out. And with that bridge, you can now attract foreign investors Of course, they have to look at those plans again and sort them out and make sure that they are viable and that they are sustainable. And then because they should be capable of taking them to the market, bring PPPs, all the stuff. So government can focus on social inclusion in health, employment, poverty reduction, and working with state governments in agriculture so that we can get down to more serious business. And of course, there is also the case that our rising debt profile, even though we have substantial headroom on external borrowing, but there's the likelihood of a fiscal stress because the debt service to government revenue is well over 50% on the current budget. But you know that in disbursement, it might even swing up to 60%. And so that's not a level of comfort. So what we need to do is to up all our game in terms of revenue generation, wherever. And you can see signs of it, not only in the expansion of the revenue base, but also in the intensity in collecting those. And you've seen lots of feathers being ruffled by efforts of FIRS to get more money into the coffers. And then, of course, the customs are rising to the challenge of beefing up revenue. So all of those are necessary, and they have to come timely to enable us support the spend that is expected to keep the economy afloat. The government hasn't done badly in terms of keeping their workforce. I haven't heard that government has retrenched anybody. But we've lost over 30 million, about 39 million jobs in the private sector. So it's music to my ear to hear that there are some more quantitative easing coming on, and then there are some more resources going to the base of the pyramid, the MSMEs. Now, bear in mind, although the disruptions of the supply chain affected output, a lot of the resources, quantitative resources, are heading to output to boost output. But 84% of our GDP in the area of consumption is household consumption. Government is only 5.4 to 5.7 consumption, and then the rest is in investment. So if you don't balance the resources across increasing output and then protecting aggregate demand, you have a disconnect. You have a disconnect because today you report growth and then tomorrow you report collapse because all the money they borrowed to produce could not be bought by those who are supposed to be consuming. So that's why you need to balance both and then have a much more. So that's why I appreciate the measures that NIE has just mentioned, and that is real.
In a couple of minutes, we'll be taking some NCDC update. But quickly, let's veer off maybe the petroleum sector and look at Dr. Abari. I know you are in the steering committee, the board of what I don't know how to specifically say it now, the National Youth Investment Fund. What's the update on that?
Well, I think the update of that is that it is a fund actually that is already being put in place and is being assessed. To a very large extent, this is all an extension of the interventions that should go to the younger people who have actually shown a lot of ingenuity, a lot of survival and skills, even in the face of adversities. And I think, if you recall in my opening remarks, that we have a country with a very interesting demography. A country of 200 million people or more, depending on which of the figures sources you actually want to use. Most of which is below the age of 35. Okay. And I said, this is actually a country that has a lot of resources. And what is that resources? Human resources, which you need to tap into, to harness, to develop, and to nurture. But if you are able to actually catch this category of young men who are active, who have shown a lot of zeal, a lot of ingenuity, and a lot of perseverance in responding to these challenges, then they need to be supported. And this is actually the kind of support that is being given, that is being put in place. In the last tweet, somebody asked, how do we assess that kind of? And of course, like I said, there is a lot of information in the newspapers on how to assess this kind of fund. And of course, when you have when you take a profile of most of the people really that have been said to be engaging in all of this crime and criminality that we have been seeing, you know, in different parts of the country, many of them comprised of young people, maybe 40 years down, you know. No, that is not to say that there are no actually elders also involved. There are elders that support and the rest of them, but the real foot soldiers are the young people who are energetic, who have a lot of ideas, who are always very active on the social media, you know, on Instagram, on Twitter, on WhatsApp, on To Go, on and all of this, you know. And of course, they imbibe a lot of they assess a lot of information, and most of it uncensored, and of course such kind of information helps in shaping their thoughts, you know, in shaping their thoughts and their mannerisms and their attitudes. And if you are able to get them gainfully engaged, you know, gainfully engaged, one way or the other, developing their skills, giving them empowerment, giving them skills, giving them opportunities that are lying out there, which they have never thought it existed, you know, you stand to benefit three things. You stand to benefit building human security, which will have the effect of reduced crime and criminality. You stand to benefit empowering a large chunk of your population which is young and able-bodied, and therefore you promote wealth creation, you address poverty related issues by reducing the funds of poverty. And then thirdly, you also stand to benefit from creating an atmosphere that reduces poverty and creates wealth, and engaging in developing human security. Then that way you are on the path to building a society that is secure, that is prosperous, that is disciplined.
Okay. Before I take on Malam Uthman, just reaching us from the Nigeria Center for Disease Control is the COVID-19 update in Nigeria, and it says that Nigeria confirmed 90 new cases of COVID-19 in the country as at 15th of September 2020. A breakdown shows that Lagos has 33 cases, Plateau 27, Kaduna 17, and Ogun State 6. Others are the Federal Capital Territory 4, 1 each in Anambra, Ekiti, and Nasarawa states. The 90 new cases bring the total number of confirmed cases in Nigeria to 56,478. Discharged cases 44,430, and total deaths now stands at 1,088 deaths. That's the update on COVID-19. And quickly, Malam Uthman, I imagine Dr. Barry heading a citizen engagement agency, that is the National Orientation Agency, engaging you as a change agent for government to talk to Nigerians, vulnerable Nigerians who probably would have been brainwashed to believe that the decision taken by government is a very hard and bad decision. What would you be telling them?
Well, that is a tall order. But all that I can tell you is that the average Nigerian wants to be taken into confidence. So it's not just a question of the ordinary rank and file. You falsify them, then you think you solve the problem. The problem needs holistic approach. The organized private sector, that is a big employer of labor. If you can take into confidence Manufacturers Association, NASIMA, NECA, that's Nigeria Employers Consultative Association, government is taking them into confidence. One policies are going to evolve. Nigeria Labour Congress and Trade Union Congress, believe me, they are partners in progress. You take their leadership into confidence, you are not going to have all these strikes and threats, lockout and so on and so forth.
Each time you're on, Kunle will be calling. Kunle has called again. Let me take Kunle's call now.
Okay.
Hello, Kunle, you're on to Tuesday Live.
You have to, if I have to work with Dr. Abari, he knows everything. I don't have to tell him anything. But what all that it is that tell the people the truth.
Okay.
You don't blame only federal government. The state governors, the 774 local governments, what are they doing with their own allocation? There is no excuse whatsoever why you will go to any primary school in Nigeria and find that there is no class. Children are sitting on the ground. What we used to call blackboard is no longer black. Children are walking. There is no uniform, no books, nothing. Teachers are not paid and they don't show up. So all these crazy things we are doing and we take for granted. But the only thing you can do is to point a finger to maybe head of state or something, or somebody else. So as our people always say, every time you point an accusing finger, the other four are pointing back at you. We as citizens, what really are we doing? Do we individually, do we contribute to anything for being a citizen? Are we patriotic? What does it take to be a patriotic citizen? Nigerians listen to news. People in northern Nigeria have a lot of these little radio stations they watch, overseas radio, everything. So you cannot talk of lack of enlightenment. People know. But because the third columnists, I don't want to call them fifth, the columnists are there. The more we remain in the dark, the more they prosper. If they organize a rampage or attack on somebody, they don't use their own children. They don't use that one is out of the question. So why you ordinary citizen, you will be allowed to be brainwashed for something that is not genuine or something that is not true? All our religions preach peace. But when it suits some people, they misinterpret that religion for their own dubious end. So the orientation agency and his own new approach to enable young people to take care of their own lives must be supported by public enlightenment. Okay. More and more public enlightenment. Let them see the truth. Let us put our priorities right. If you go to our state capitals and other places, you will see that development is taking place in the state capital. Nothing is happening outside the state capital. So what is the priority? We want to put gigantic structure. So His Excellency will be called, he's the one who picks it. But you cannot, my own local government, I think in the last 30 years, nobody construct 1 inch of road. And we are just some kilometers outside Kano State, Kano capital.
Still come back to you.
So when you talk of all these kind of problems, they are the things that prostrate the ordinary person. And so many promises were made by those people who are very close to them. And all those promises were broken. So even if you come with genuine intention, they still suspect you that you are one of them.
Okay. Let me hold this up. I'll be right back to you.
Go ahead.
Well, we still have 2 more Vox Pops on the reports. When they're ready, I'll be told and we'll take them. But quickly, from Benue State, a tweet is coming from Otejiri. It says, Benue State, as she stands, can feed 30% of our population. Why is there no railway from Benue State to Lagos? For example, what major benefit is the railway from Abuja to Kaduna at this point? It's a question. You talk about corruption and cabal as if there are monsters that can't be reduced with a working business plan. You can eliminate these cabals. That's the reaction from Benue State. And quickly, when we return, there are 3 tweets I'll have to take to Professor Kenife and Ni Akinsiju. But quickly, let's take the Vox Pop put together still to sustain the conversation tonight from Jos.
Abuja to Jos will actually encourage tourists to be on the plateau.
The key issue here will be issues such as you got to be customer focused now.
Think more long term, and you can't think long term without planning short term, because it's your short term strategy that makes you survive into the long term. Businesses should be more data driven.
They also need to be open to their customers. Transparency is always good in every sphere of life.
Unless we adopt a robust way that such monies could be transmitted from the source to the destination within a period of time, for you to have value addition, you have to go into production.
Those are Nigerians reacting from Jos Plateau State. And quickly, Ni Akinsiju, please, a tweet from Usman Garba says, has the government not chosen the wrong time to remove petroleum subsidies? How do you react to it?
For any decision that is supposed to be progressive, yes, we are coming out of a pandemic, but the truth also is that this decision was made, I think, sometime since March. You know, when price of a liter of petrol came down to as little as 123 naira, and the immediate reaction of that to that price was that of triumphalism by users of PMS. Well, some of us on a number of programs had also explained that we should not see this in the narrow context of reduction of price, but rather as being open to the dynamics of the open market, and that is the forces of demand and supply. It is the price had gone down at that time, principally because price of crude oil had also gone down, and that we should expect price to move up when and if price of crude oil moved up. So if the truth is that this is not just a decision that was made 2 or 3 weeks ago. It was made, I think, 3 months ago when price first came down. And I think what the government did was to use the opportunity, you know, of that price floor, as it were, to introduce deregulation. And for me, what I appeal to Nigeria is to consider what economists, and thankfully Prof is here, what economists would apply as opportunity cost. You know, for every liter of petrol that is subsidized, it's the real cost for those things we are losing out, for infrastructure, for good roads, enhanced power that would drive our industries, for education, for hospitals and all that. That's the real cost of it. So if we determine, you know, to give this policy how do I call it? If we give it a try and put faith and confidence in it, I am believing that we will be able to move fund that we have been spending on consumables, you know, because fuel, yes, most fuel that we use, you know, in Nigeria are for traffic. They are not for functional purpose, because what you use for commercial fuel mostly is for diesel. And diesel is what you use for commercial purpose mostly, to move goods and properties from one point to the other. So that is your economic fuel. The PMS is traffic fuel. You use it to just move from one point to the other. You may not necessarily be involved in any form of commercial activities in the use of that fuel. And meanwhile, that fuel is coming at a huge cost, not just to you, but also to other Nigerians through government coffers. So rather than now use that to just keep moving around, why don't we corral all this the subsidy that we are using? I may be using 2 naira subsidy, especially those who commute through public transport. Their subsidy is very low. But the owner of a 4-wheel drive, the big man, Jeep, may be using up to 10,000 subsidy a day. Those are the people that are enjoying subsidy because they are using big cars. Some of them also have 3 or 4 of those cars. So when you do a comparative analysis, the poor man who uses public transport, his gain or a gain out of the subsidy may just be about 3 naira or 4 naira a day, while the big man, who has cars lying everywhere in his compound, may actually be spending, may be using 10 to 20,000 of subsidy in a day. So rather than, meanwhile, it is this same person that is that has access to just a smaller percentage of the subsidy that is also suffering bad road, suffering inefficient supply of power, suffering inefficient. Is not able to access good health, good education. So why don't we gather all this money from subsidy and direct to our national needs that will help individual needs at that, bottom of the pyramid level? See, there was a time, I think 2 years ago or 3 years ago, when price of petroleum went up, PMS went up in the US. People were selling off their 4-wheel drives. It was because it was the reality of the time that they could not afford this. They were selling it off, and 4-wheel drives were no longer popular, even up to today in the US. So our reality is that this our national need, and what will drive our national productivity is to be able to move money, from subsidy to functional infrastructure that will help our productivity, help our comfort zone in terms of our private lives, and enhance our own well-being as individuals.
Let me go to Professor Kenife. Professor Kenife, we don't have all the time, but could you, by way of your concluding thoughts, scratch on issues concerning power quickly in just a few minutes?
The shenanigans going on in the power sector by way of misalignments and all that kind of stories, we should begin to kiss goodbye to these stories. It's just getting out of hand. Think of how many billions of dollars have been sunk into this industry since 2014 we privatized it. And we're still not getting anywhere with it. And it's simply because we are stuck on this whole business that fossil fuel will drive our economic systems. It just doesn't make sense. If we spent half of what we have put in here in creating alternative sources, we wouldn't be where we are. I feel so ashamed that South Africa, we have 4 times their population, and they have 10 times more power than us, and with a factor of 40 times. Nobody wants to hear that story. But I also need to say that in relation to the issue you were grappling with, people don't subsidize consumption. Please, for goodness sake. When you subsidize consumption, you are putting money you cannot account for into the hands of people. It's not if it doesn't go to the people. You subsidize production so that you create jobs. If you take 1 trillion as money we are throwing out in subsidy, please take 40% of that and go and do value addition so that agricultural produce that you are processing will create jobs for people, and don't keep on exporting commodity export, to neighboring countries. Take some part of that money you are burning in subsidy and give as loan, not dash, not grant. Give it as loan to modular refineries. Look at the percentage loss of the refineries. Minus 20% last year, then minus 57%, minus 60-something%. That's our refinery. But modular refinery of 20,000 barrels costs you between $75 million and $100 million. If you put $1 billion there, which is just a fraction of your subsidy, put it there, those 10 companies that will give you 200,000 liters, 200,000 barrels will be processed, more than the capacity of all these refineries that are asking you for $3 billion to service them. Diversify the economy so that when Dangote goes online, there are also 10 other modular refineries that are mopping up 200,000 liters, and you have diversification in the economy. And we'll start talking about how we export our petrol, how we focus on more downstream products that will increase our GDP. We're just not on. This story doesn't make sense. How can Texas, one state in America, have more than 200 refineries and petrochemicals, and you haven't got one that works in our Delta region? It doesn't make sense. It's just one of those things that don't make sense. Now, if the government is facing the specter, according to the prediction of the World Bank, that by 2025, about almost 85% of our debt service, of our revenue will go on debt service. So what are you saying? We're going to wait until the country comes to a halt, or it grinds to a halt before our eyes will open and we'll start scrambling for resources and kiss goodbye to this so-called subsidy. But I do appreciate that some of that money should also go to buy more buses to reduce the pain for those people who are going to be affected. But definitely not to allow all this money to be spent on people carrying petrol across the border to other countries. There's so many of those that we just can't live with.
Professor Kenny Faye, Professor Kenny, I have to hold you here at this point. Thank you so much. And at this point, I have to say thank you so much for being on Tuesday Live tonight. And also to Niyi Akinsiju, we must thank you so much for making time to be on the program tonight. Thank you. Program tonight.
Much.
Utman, let me quickly thank you before I allow Dr. Abari to do his concluding thoughts. It was nice having you on Tuesday Live tonight. And before I allow Dr. Abari to say bye to us, what is your concluding thoughts? Just in a few words.
Well, my concluding thoughts, first and foremost,
just a few words.
Nigerians will have to keep hope alive. This country is a great country. We have got everything that a country needs to develop. We need to get the correct attitude. We need to cultivate and sustain the correct values, the values of hard work, honesty, discipline, transparency, accountability, shun corruption, be of good behavior, love the country, do as we will wish others to do unto us, so that we also do unto others. But most importantly, we must have a leadership that will come to the citizens clean, a leadership that is courageous, a leadership that is forthright, a leadership that is honest, and a leadership that will not just play to the gallery.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It was nice having you on Tuesday Live tonight.